I remember the moment the sky changed above our home, as if the sun dimmed without a single cloud passing, because that was the day my mother-in-law arrived with the quiet thunder of authority she always carried, a presence that demanded space even when no one invited it. And I felt that familiar tightening in my chest, the one that warned me a storm was coming. My husband, Michael, stood by the front door, trying to smile, trying to make this visit feel normal, but the stiffness in his shoulders gave him away. He was still the man I married, the man who once held my face in his hands and promised that nothing and no one would ever come between us. Yet lately, his eyes carried a distance I could not name, a distance that seemed to grow every time she walked into our world. Her car rolled up, glossy and dark, flanked by two more of the same, each one holding men with stone faces dressed in black suits, their movements perfectly synced, like shadows that obeyed only her command. And when she stepped out, with her heels tapping against the driveway, it felt like the earth bowed before her, while I stood frozen, watching pieces of my peace break away. She barely acknowledged me, her gaze drifting past me like I was a trimmed branch on the edge of her estate, something that existed but held no real value. Instead, she pressed her hand against Michael, her smile smooth and shimmering with the kind of love that felt less like affection and more like possession. "My son, you look tired," she whispered in that soft voice she used only for him, the voice that always made me feel like a trespasser in my own marriage. He leaned into her touch, and something inside me pulled painfully, as if a thread had snapped. But I kept my face calm because that was what I did. I held myself together even when the ground shook beneath me. Her security guards moved around her silently, forming a small moving wall as she walked inside, surveying the house like she was inspecting a kingdom she secretly owned. And I followed them all, slowly, every step heavier than the last. Michael went ahead, guiding her through rooms she had seen dozens of times, but she pretended each detail was new, asking questions that sounded less like curiosity and more like subtle accusations. "Why is this here? When did she change this? Who allowed that?" I felt each word land on me like a falling tile, but Michael did not notice, or maybe he chose not to notice, and that stung even more. By the time we reached the living room, she had settled into her favorite armchair, the one she always used as if it bore her initials. She crossed her legs, titled her head, and looked at me with the kind of smile that promised an approaching strike. "My dear," she said, "I think we should talk." My pulse quickened, but I nodded and sat down across from her. Michael sat beside her as if instinct guided him, and she reached out, placing her hand over his as if anchoring him to her side before turning her gaze back to me. "I have been hearing things," she murmured, and her voice slid like cold silk across the room. "Things about you, things that concern me, things about what you are doing to my son." The words sliced through the air without sharpness, only softness, which somehow cut deeper than any blade. Michael shifted uncomfortably, his fingers tapping lightly against his knee, a sign I knew well, a sign of doubt, worry, confusion, and my heart trembled because I knew whatever she was about to say, she had already planted seeds in him long before today. She continued, "Your decisions, your influence, your need for control. I see it all." Control. The irony almost made my breath falter because she was the one who managed every corner of our life like a puppeteer hidden behind silk curtains. Yet she sat here accusing me of the very thing she thrived on. I opened my mouth to speak, but she lifted a hand and my words dissolved before they formed. "I know you want the best for him," she said, "but you do not understand how fragile he is, how easily he can be led, how vulnerable his heart becomes under the wrong guidance." Her eyes locked onto mine, and there it was, the message beneath the message. "You are the wrong guidance." Her security guard stepped quietly closer to her left, as if waiting for an order, and my skin prickled with unease because since when do family conversations require professional protection? Michael looked between us, his jaw tightening, his breath unsteady, and in that moment I realized he did not know whom to believe, and that truth crushed me in ways I could not fully understand. I stood slowly because if I stayed seated, the weight of her accusations might drown me. I took a small step forward, my hands trembling, but my voice steady because someone in this room needed to speak truth. "I love him," I said softly, and the words felt like releasing something heavy from my chest. I have never tried to control him. I only tried to support him through every storm, through every fear, through every night he came home, feeling like the world was too heavy. But she did not flinch. She blinked once slowly. Then she smiled. A smile of victory, not understanding. "My dear," she said, with gentle cruelty, "love can also be a form of control when it is not given correctly. And I fear you do not yet know how to love him in the way he needs." My breath hitched. Michael looked down. Her guard stayed still, and something inside me cracked open as the room thickened around us. She stood, and her security moved instantly, creating a small formation around her as she reached into her bag and pulled out a phone, tapping the screen with calm purpose. "I have made a decision," she said. "I'm assigning private security to stay with Michael for a while. They will accompany him and report directly to me so I can ensure he is safe from unnecessary emotional strain." Unnecessary emotional strain. She meant me. She meant my presence, my love, my existence. Michael inhaled sharply, looking up at her with shock but not refusal, and that hurt most. The hesitation, the silence, the surrender. I felt tears pushing behind my eyes, an ache swelling so wide I thought it might swallow me whole. "Why are you doing this?" I whispered, because I needed the truth, even if it destroyed me. She stood closer, her perfume soft, her expression pure elegance, hiding venom. "Because my son is slipping away from me," she said, "and I cannot allow anyone, not even you, to take him farther." Her words flooded through me like a cold tide, leaving me standing alone in a room where my marriage had shifted under my feet. And when she turned to Michael and whispered something only he could hear, I watched something leave his eyes, something warm, something ours. And what replaced it was distance, a distance sharper than any blade, a distance born of doubt planted by the woman who claimed she loved him most. And as she closed in behind her and walked toward the hallway, the world around me blurred. And I realized something terrifying. She had not just taken over the room, she had taken him, piece by piece, thought by thought, fear by fear. And I stood there trembling, knowing the worst was not today. The worst was coming. Because the moment her private security stepped into our home, everything changed. And I felt the beginning of the unraveling of me, of us, of everything I thought was unbreakable. Yet somewhere deep inside, a spark refused to die, a spark that whispered, "This is not the end. This is only the beginning of the fight I never wanted, but now must face, alone." The night after she left the house felt like the world had been drained of all its color, as if someone had taken a soft cloth and wiped the sky clean of every shade of warmth, leaving only a dim whisper of light floating in the corners of the room. I sat in the living room alone, the silence stretching around me like a veil, and all I could hear was the echo of her voice repeating in my mind the words that had sliced into me like quiet lightning. I kept replaying the scene, the way her security moved around her like they were shielding the queen of a fragile empire, the way Michael had stood beside her, uncertain, afraid, conflicted, the way his eyes had darted away from mine when I looked at him, begging silently for him to see me, to believe me, to remember me. But the truth was harsh. He did not reach for my hand. He did not speak in my defense. He did not choose me, not in that moment. I wrapped my arms around myself, bracing against the cold weight inside my chest, because it felt like I was holding every broken piece of my heart. And if I loosened my grip for even a second, everything would fall apart and scatter at my feet. Hours passed without time existing in any real way, until I heard footsteps, soft, hesitant, approaching from the hallway. I lifted my head and saw Michael standing there, his silhouette framed by the dim light behind him, his shoulders sagging as if the weight of the world had settled on them. He walked slowly toward me, each step a question. And when he stopped in front of me, I looked up at him, searching for something familiar, something that still belonged to us. He sat down beside me, not touching, not leaning, not reaching, just sitting like a guest, unsure if the seat was truly his. I waited, because I wanted his first words to be his truth, not something forced by my fear or his mother's whispers. He exhaled deeply, and the sound cracked something in me because it reminded me of all the nights he had come home tired, worn out, defeated, and I had taken his head in my lap and stroked his hair until he fell asleep, breathing softly and safely. "I do not know what to think," he said, his voice rough and trembling. And that admission alone almost broke me. "She told me things," he whispered. "Things about you. Things about how you talk to me, behave with me, influence me. And I do not know whether she is wrong or whether I am blind." His words hit like a slow-moving wave, not violent, but constant, unstoppable, and painful. "Michael," I said softly, and my voice shook because I have only ever tried to love you. He closed his eyes as if the sound of my voice hurt him in places neither of us could see. "It is not that I do not love you," he said, and the moment those words left his lips, something inside me screamed silently. Because when people say it is not that they do not love you, it usually means love is no longer enough to hold them steady. "It is just," he continued, "that I feel caught in the middle. And every time both of you push, I feel like I am losing the parts of myself that hold me together." I reached for his hand slowly, cautiously, but he withdrew it gently, not abruptly, not coldly, but softly, hesitantly, as if afraid of what it would mean if he let me hold him again. I felt that movement like a strike, deep in my chest. Not loud, not sharp, just final. He stood up after a moment, running a hand through his hair, and I saw how tired he was, how lost, how vulnerable. And maybe that was why she could get to him so easily. He had always been gentle, always been someone who needed grounding, someone who needed reassurance, and instead of holding his mother at a distance, he let her whispers become truth in the places where he was weakest. "Tonight," he said softly, "the guards will be stationed outside. They are not here to intimidate you. They are here because she insisted, and I do not know how to refuse her. Not right now. Not like this." A cold shiver crawled up my spine. Guards. Outside. Watching the house like I was the threat? Like I was the problem? Like I was the danger? He looked at me helplessly, and then he walked away, leaving the faint scent of his cologne behind him, a scent that once meant comfort, and now felt like a shadow slipping through my fingers. The house was quiet for the rest of the night, but I could feel the presence outside the walls, men standing silently under the moonlit sky, watching, guarding, reporting. And every time a floorboard shifted or a branch moved outside the window, I felt like someone was observing me.
measuring me, evaluating me. By morning, I had barely slept, but I forced myself to stand, to cook, to breathe, to function, because giving in to fear meant letting her win, and I refused to hand her that victory. When I walked into the kitchen, I found Michael already awake, sitting at the table, his phone in his hand, his face pale, his jaw tight. And when he looked up at me, his eyes were filled with something heavy, something he could not carry alone. "She called," he said quietly, and his voice held the tremor of a man trapped between two storms. "Of course she did," I whispered. "She wants me to stay with her for a few days," he said, not meeting my gaze. "She thinks it's best while things cool down." "For her to take you away from me, you mean?" He flinched, as if my words stung him, and he pressed his fingers against his eyes as though trying to wipe away everything he felt but could not speak. "I do not want to leave," he whispered, "but I also do not want to fight with her anymore. I'm tired of being pulled apart." I stepped closer, placing my hand gently on the table between us, not touching him, not leaning, not reaching, just sitting, like a guest, unsure if the seat was truly his. And he did not reach for me. Instead, he stood up, pushed back his chair, and grabbed a small bag, already packed and waiting near the counter. And something inside me shattered just a little more, because he had packed it before telling me, which meant he had already made his decision long before this conversation. My voice trembled as I spoke. "So you're going with her?" He stayed still for a moment before giving the smallest nod, the kind people give when the truth is too heavy to say out loud. He hesitated near the doorway, turning back to look at me, his eyes filled with something like regret, something like an apology, something like the ghost of love trying to survive in a place it no longer understood. "This is temporary," he murmured. "I just need time to think, time to breathe, time to figure out what's happening to us." But the words felt like drifting smoke, soft, empty, vanishing before they could hold any meaning. I walked him to the door, each step tightening around my ribs like invisible hands, trembling, pressing, gripping. And when he stepped outside, two guards immediately straightened, watching him, watching me, watching everything. Michael turned one last time and whispered a fragile goodbye before walking to the waiting car, his figure small against the cold morning light. And I stood there until the vehicle drove away, until the last shadow of him disappeared around the corner. Only then did my knees weaken. Only then did my breath catch. Only then did the house feel unbearably silent. And when I finally closed the door behind me, a single truth settled inside me. Like a slow-burning ember, she had taken him. But she had also made a mistake. Because now she had awakened something in me. Something fierce. Something steady. Something she never expected. I would not let her destroy my marriage. I would not let her rewrite my story. I would not let her decide the fate of the love I had fought so hard to build. This was not surrender. This was the beginning. A quiet beginning. A determined beginning. A beginning shaped by heartbreak and fire. And I whispered to myself through trembling breaths, "I will get him back."
The days after Michael left moved like slow waves, dragging across the shore, pulling pieces of me with them every time they receded, leaving behind fragments of a life that no longer felt mine. The house was quieter than it had ever been, even quieter than the days before we married, when I lived alone and silence was a companion instead of a punishment. Now the silence felt watchful, heavy, filled with the ghost of footsteps that no longer echoed across the floor. Every morning I woke with the same instinct to turn my head and look for him on the pillow beside me, expecting his soft breathing, his warmth, his presence. But all I found was the cold imprint of a man who had been pulled away from me by whispers sharp enough to cut through the vows we had spoken, the love we had built, the dreams we had held together. I tried to keep moving, to keep living, to keep breathing, because stopping meant sinking, and I could not afford to drown, not now, not when the battle had barely begun. I cleaned our room slowly, deliberately, running my fingers along the edges of the nightstand where he always placed his watch. I washed his mug, even though it had already been cleaned since the morning he left. I folded the blanket at the end of the bed the way he liked, even though there was no one to appreciate the gesture except the empty air. But every small act reminded me of him. Every small act reminded me that he was gone. Every small act whispered the truth I could not escape. She had taken him, and he had let himself be taken. One night, I finally built the courage to call him. I held the phone in my hand until my palm grew warm with the heat of my own hesitation. And when I pressed the call button, my heart pounded so hard I felt it against my ribs like a desperate knocking, begging for a way out. He answered on the third ring, his voice soft, distant, tired. Hey. Just one word, yet it wrapped around me like a thread, pulling me toward every memory, every moment, every breath we once shared. Michael, I whispered, can we talk? There was a pause, long enough to fill the room with dread, before he finally replied, I cannot talk for long. Not, I do not want to talk. Not, I miss you. Not, I am coming home. Just a barrier. A quiet closing door. I swallowed hard, fighting the tremble in my voice. How are you? Another small pause, then a faint sigh. I am fine. She is fine. The house is quiet. He meant her house, her world, her rules. And the truth stung. Do you miss me? I asked softly because the question had been living inside my chest like a trapped bird, beating its wings against my ribs, begging to be set free. He inhaled sharply, and for a moment, I felt him breaking through the wall she had built around him. I felt his heart reaching toward mine like it always had, like it always would, if he just let it. But then I heard another voice, faint but unmistakable. His mother's voice, crisp, polished, drifting into the room where he stood. Michael, dinner is ready. His breathing changed, his tone sharpened, his distance grew. I have to go, he murmured. Michael, wait, please, just 1 second. I need to know where we stand. I need to know if you believe the things she said about me. I need to know if you still love me. Silence. Only silence. A terrible, crushing silence. Then he whispered words that shattered through me like cold wind slipping into my bones. I do not know what to think right now. I just need space. Space. The word felt like a blade carving through my chest. Before I could respond, he ended the call gently. Not angrily, not abruptly,
but softly, as if he believed that kindness made the goodbye hurtless, but it did not. It only made it worse. I held the phone against my heart, feeling the ache spread like slow fire, and tears finally escaped, slipping down my face without a sound, as if my body had grown tired of holding everything inside. That night, I lay awake, my thoughts racing through every moment of our relationship, searching desperately for the place where everything went wrong. But there was no single moment, no sharp turn, no obvious break, just subtle shifts, slow changes, tiny fractures that grew under the pressure of a woman who believed love meant possession and protection meant control. But as the hours passed and the sky outside shifted from black to a pale, quiet blue, something inside me hardened. Not cold, not cruel, but strong, steady, fierce, like a flame that refused to die no matter how many storms passed over it. I realized that waiting for him to come back on his own was no longer enough. I realized that silence would not save us. I realized that love needed action, not just ache. The next morning, I dressed early, wearing the color he always said made me look like strength itself, and I brushed my hair back, smoothing away the signs of sleepless nights. Then I stood in front of the mirror and whispered a truth that steadied every trembling part of me. I am not losing him. I am not surrendering. I am fighting for my marriage. And so I grabbed my keys, stepped out of the house, and drove toward the estate where his mother lived, a place that always felt too large, too polished, too cold, a place that smelled of wealth and ambition and hidden intentions. When I reached the gates, her security immediately stepped forward, one of them raising a hand in a silent command to stop. I rolled my window slightly, watching their stern, guarded expressions. "I need to see my husband," I said calmly, though my heart was fluttering like terrified wings. "We have orders to prevent any unapproved entry," one of them replied. I felt my jaw tighten. Unapproved, as if I were a stranger, as if I were a threat, as if I were not his wife. I took a deep breath and met her gaze, steady and unshaken. "Tell her I am here," I said, "and if she tries to block me again, understand this clearly, I will not leave." They exchanged glances, silent conversation passing between them, then one of them turned and walked toward the mansion. Minutes stretched, long, heavy, endless, until finally the iron gates shifted, slowly, opening just wide enough for my car to pass. As I drove inside, my pulse thundered in my ears, but beneath the fear was something powerful, something I had not felt in days. Certainty. When I stepped out of the car, she was already standing at the top of the steps, her posture regal, her eyes sharp, her smile polished and poisonous, her security positioned discreetly but firmly behind her, like silent shadows ready to follow her command. "You should not have come," she said softly, as if offering a kindness rather than delivering a warning. I walked toward her slowly, steadily, never breaking her gaze. "I came to see my husband." She tilted her head, her smile widening just a touch. "He is resting," she replied, and then her tone dropped into quiet condescension. "He does not need emotional disruption right now."
The days after that felt lighter,
but not easy. The tension of what had passed still lingered like shadows stretching across the corners of our home, but now they no longer controlled us. Michael and I moved carefully together, rebuilding the trust that had been shaken, brick by brick, step by step, breath by breath. And every touch, every word, every glance was a reminder that we had survived what had tried to tear us apart. She never fully regained the control she thought she had over him, and though her presence remained at times like a storm on the horizon, it could no longer breach the walls we had rebuilt together, stronger, higher, unshakable. We learned to speak without fear, to listen without doubt, to hold each other without restraint. And in that quiet strength, the love we had almost lost became more alive, more real, more ours than ever before. I looked at him one evening as the sun dipped low, painting the sky with gold and rose, and I realized that the battle had not been against her. It had been against the fear of losing what I loved most. And now, that fear had been replaced by certainty. We were together, whole, undivided, and nothing would take that from us again. And in that knowing smile shared between us, the storm finally passed, leaving only the calm, warm light of us.
If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Every single subscription motivates me to bring you even more exciting and dramatic HOA stories. And don't forget to tap the bell icon so you never miss a new upload. I'll see you in the next story, where justice gets even more satisfying.